Would you like to know more?
Would you like to know more?
4 words that became the sinister catchphrase of fascistic propaganda, embedded in a film that many moviegoers didn't realize was satirizing them as they cheered along. Beautiful young actors with perfect teeth posing like Nazi propaganda posters. Giant alien bugs being blown to smithereens in glorious fountains of neon blue goo. A satirical edge so sharp that most critics at the time needed stitches after missing it completely. Shower scenes that would make a censor blush. Neil Patrick Harris strutting around in what can only be described as SS officer cosplay. This is what happened to Starship Troopers. Coming off the critical and commercial catastrophe that was Showgirls, Dutch provocateur Paul Verhoeven needed a win in the worst way. What he delivered instead was a $100 million middle finger to American military jingoism, disguised as a sci-fi action blockbuster. A film that studio executives thought would be Aliens meets Top Gun, but ended up more like Triumph of the Will meets Beverly Hills 90210. With its deliberately wooden performances, excessive violence, and razor-sharp military satire that flew over more heads than a fleet of Federation starships, Starship Troopers remains one of the most brilliantly misunderstood films of the 1990s. When Verhoeven first picked up Robert Heinlein's controversial 1959 novel, he couldn't even finish it, later admitting he found it boring and depressing, and that it made him feel very bad. Instead of a faithful adaptation, Verhoeven and screenwriter Ed Neumeier decided to turn the militaristic source material on its head, crafting a gleefully subversive takedown of fascism wrapped in the candy-coated shell of a big-budget space adventure. The result was a film that had audiences cheering for characters who, had they existed in 1940s Europe, would have been sporting swastikas on their sleeves. I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
The cheerful refrain of child soldiers crushing bugs became a rallying cry for audiences who didn't realize they were laughing at themselves. The path from Heinlein's militaristic novel to Verhoeven's scathing satire wasn't just a deviation, it was a complete ideological 180. While the book earnestly championed military service and restricted citizenship, Verhoeven and screenwriter Ed Neumeier were busy crafting what the director would later call a warning about the future. TriStar Pictures had no idea what they were getting into when they greenlit this $105 million bug hunt in 1995. They thought they were funding a straightforward sci-fi war movie based on a beloved military novel. What they got instead was Verhoeven doing what Verhoeven does best, subverting expectations while making studio executives reach for their antacids. The Dutch director, who had lived through Nazi occupation as a child, saw in Starship Troopers a chance to comment on American militarism and fascistic tendencies hiding in plain sight. The casting process was nothing short of brilliant misdirection. Rather than hiring established stars, Verhoeven deliberately sought out actors who looked like they belonged in Calvin Klein ads. Casper Van Dien with his chiseled jawline, Denise Richards with her perfect smile, and Dina Meyer looking like she stepped out of a Guess campaign. I wanted actors who looked like the blonde, white Aryan characters you'd see in Leni Riefenstahl films, Verhoeven would later admit. This wasn't a bug in the system, it was a feature, creating what critic Jay Hoberman would later call 90210 in space. When Neumeier delivered his script, studio executives apparently nodded along, completely missing the fact that their heroes were literally dressed in SS-inspired uniforms. The film's Federal Network propaganda segments were lifted almost directly from Nazi newsreels, yet somehow everyone thought they were getting Independence Day with bugs. If there's one thing Verhoeven proved with Starship Troopers, it's that sometimes the most effective satire is the kind that half your audience doesn't even realize is satire. The only good bug is a dead bug.
The only good bug is a dead bug.
The battle cry of Johnny Rico and his mobile infantry pals, delivered with the kind of straight-faced conviction that makes you wonder if they're in on the joke. The cast of Starship Troopers represents one of the most brilliant casting coups in sci-fi history. A group of impossibly good-looking young actors delivering fascist propaganda with the earnestness of high school drama students putting on a patriotic play. Casper Van Dien's Johnny Rico became the poster boy for beautiful, mindless patriotism. With a jaw that could cut glass and the acting range of a particularly enthusiastic recruiting poster, Van Dien was perfect for the role of a privileged Buenos Aires rich kid who trades his silver spoon for a pulse rifle. Verhoeven reportedly chose Van Dien because he looked like the Aryan ideal, which wasn't exactly a compliment coming from a man who'd lived through Nazi occupation. When Van Dien energetically shouts, "Come on, you apes, you want to live forever?"
Come on, you apes, you wanna live forever!
There's not a hint of irony, which is precisely what makes it so goddamn brilliant. Then there's Denise Richards as Carmen Ibanez, the ambitious pilot whose career ambitions trump her relationship with Rico. Critics savaged Richards' performance, completely missing that she was supposed to be a one-dimensional propaganda character. While everyone was busy criticizing her wooden line delivery, no one noticed that Verhoeven had essentially cast her as a Riefenstahl propaganda model in a flight suit. It's like complaining that the actors in actual Nazi propaganda films weren't showing enough emotional range. The masterstroke was bringing in Verhoeven regular Michael Ironside as the gruff Lieutenant Rassak, whose classroom speech about violence being the supreme authority from which all other authority derives is delivered with such conviction, you might miss that it's basically fascism 101. Clancy Brown's brutal drill sergeant Zim gleefully breaks limbs while barking as his recruit writhes in agony. And let's not forget Neil Patrick Harris, trading in his Doogie Howser scrubs for a leather trench coat and telepathic powers. His transition from fresh-faced intelligence officer to full-blown SS-styled psychic inquisitor so gradual you might not notice, until he's literally reading the mind of a terrified bug. Behind the scenes, the cast reportedly had a blast, even though most of them didn't fully grasp what kind of movie they were making. Van Dien and Meyer engaged in an off-screen romance amid the bug guts and propaganda speeches. Years later, many would admit they didn't understand the film's satirical elements until they saw the finished product, or in some cases, until years later, when critics finally caught on to what Verhoeven had been doing all along. "The Federation will prevail!" A sentiment shouted with such unflinching certainty that you start to wonder if maybe these fascists in spacesuits might have a point. Starship Troopers follows the journey of Johnny Rico from privileged high school jock to battle-hardened bug killer, a hero's journey. If your idea of heroism involves exterminating an alien species that may or may not have actually started the conflict. The film kicks off in the glossy, propaganda-drenched world of future Buenos Aires, which looks suspiciously like Beverly Hills with better technology. Our fresh-faced teens, Rico, his girlfriend Carmen, and best friend Carl, are deciding their futures in a world where citizenship and voting rights are earned through federal service. When a giant asteroid obliterates Rico's hometown, conveniently blamed on bugs from the distant planet Klendathu without a shred of evidence, it's wartime, baby! Never mind that these bugs are somehow hurling rocks across the galaxy with pinpoint accuracy, or that humans had been encroaching on bug territory for years. The narrative of "they hit us first" is accepted faster than you can say false flag operation. What follows is essentially Top Gun goes to space boot camp, as our heroes endure brutal training montages, shower together in gender-neutral locker rooms, Verhoeven's middle finger to American prudishness, and learn valuable lessons about citizenship through sanctioned violence. Meanwhile, Carmen dumps Rico for her career and a dalliance with her dreamy pilot instructor, Patrick Muldoon, serving peak 90s hair, because nothing moves a plot forward like a love triangle. The plot itself is basically a skeleton on which Verhoeven hangs his satirical meat, a framework that allows him to critique militarism, nationalism, and the dehumanization required to wage perpetual war. The genius is that it works both as a straightforward action narrative and as a scathing indictment of the very heroism it appears to celebrate. When our heroes smile at the camera in those "would you like to know more?"
Would you like to know more?
propaganda segments at the end, they've learned absolutely nothing, and that's precisely the point. Service guarantees citizenship.
And save the world. Service guarantees citizenship.
A slogan delivered with such cheerful conviction, it almost makes you forget the nightmarish visuals of teenagers being chewed to pieces by alien bugs. Behind those gore-soaked battle scenes and fascist propaganda reels was a production of truly epic scale. A $105 million gamble on Paul Verhoeven's twisted vision that somehow made it through the Hollywood system, with its satirical teeth fully intact. The bugs themselves were a groundbreaking achievement in CGI. While today's audiences might scoff at late 90s digital effects, Starship Troopers' arachnids were genuinely terrifying creations for their time. Phil Tippett, the legendary stop-motion animator behind RoboCop and Jurassic Park, oversaw the creation of these skittering nightmares. The sheer variety of bug designs, from the standard warrior bugs to the plasma-spewing tankers to the nightmare-inducing brain bug, required a blend of practical animatronics, puppetry, and early CGI that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in 1997. When that brain bug slurps out a general's brains through its proboscis, that's not just a computer effect. That's a massive, slimy, practical creature that the crew had to maneuver around set. The film's production design is a masterclass in visual fascism. From the Nazi-inspired uniforms, which get progressively more SS-like as the characters rise through the ranks, to the triumph of the Will-styled architecture, every visual choice screams, "These are the baddies." Yet somehow both studio executives and many audience members completely missed the memo. The Federation's propaganda videos, with their cheerful, "Would you like to know more?" tagline, were filmed on 35mm to give them that distinct newsreel quality, while the rest of the movie was shot on crystal-clear film stock, a subtle visual cue that these segments were literal propaganda. Filming took place primarily in the desolate hellscape of Hell's Half-Acre, Wyoming, and the Badlands of South Dakota, locations that convincingly doubled for the alien planet Klendathu, with minimal set dressing. The harsh conditions weren't just for show. The cast endured real military-style boot camp training under retired Marine drill instructor Dale Dye, the same guy who tortured Tom Hanks in Saving Private Ryan. Van Deen, Richards, and company spent weeks learning to march, shoot, and function as a military unit, lending authenticity to their performances as fascist space soldiers. Perhaps the most impressive achievement was the film's absolutely bananas violence, which somehow secured an R rating despite featuring dismemberments, impalements, brain-sucking, and enough arterial spray to fill several Olympic swimming pools. The brain bug scene alone reportedly made several test screening audience members vomit, a badge of honor in Verhoeven's book. The director, who had previously pushed the boundaries of on-screen violence with RoboCop and Total Recall, was in his bloody element, filming soldiers being torn limb from limb with almost gleeful abandon. When asked why the violence was so extreme, Verhoeven simply replied that he wanted to show the horror and stupidity of warfare. The most expensive sequence, the disastrous initial invasion of Klendathu, where thousands of troopers are slaughtered, was a logistical nightmare combining hundreds of extras, massive practical explosions, and early CGI bugs. Legend has it that after filming the sequence, Verhoeven turned to his producer and said, "Now that is fascism," presumably while cackling like a madman. They sucked his brains out.
They sucked his brains out.
Not just a line from the film, but also an apt description of how critics reacted to Starship Troopers upon its 1997 release, completely missing the satirical forest for the exploding bug trees. The film was massacred more thoroughly than the mobile infantry on Klendathu, with reviewers dismissing it as mindless, fascistic drivel. The Washington Post called it a non-stop splatterfest, while Roger Ebert famously awarded it a measly 2 stars, complaining about the unsmiling cast of beautiful young actors. Like citizens of the Federation, critics took the film at face value, missing Verhoeven's deliberate camp and scathing political commentary. The poor reviews contributed to its modest $121 million worldwide gross, barely recouping its massive budget. Yet time has been remarkably kind to Starship Troopers. As the post-9/11 era ushered in a new age of jingoistic military adventurism, the film's satirical bite grew sharper. Critics began reassessing it as one of the most misunderstood movies of all time, and a prescient political satire. The Atlantic's retrospective called it the most successful satire of its decade. Today, it stands as a cult classic whose "Would you like to know more?" propaganda segments feel uncomfortably close to real-world media, proving that sometimes audiences just need a couple decades to realize when they're the ones being satirized. I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part too.
A catchphrase that launched 1,000 memes, and perfectly encapsulates Starship Troopers' unlikely journey from critical punching bag to celebrated cult classic. 25 years after its release, Verhoeven's interstellar fascist satire has embedded itself in pop culture like a neurological parasite, influencing everything from military sci-fi to political discourse. The film's DNA can be spotted across countless sci-fi properties, from the power armor of Halo to the bug-squashing gameplay of Earth Defense Force. Its unflinching depiction of warfare inspired a generation of military sci-fi, though many imitators missed the satirical point entirely. When District 9 director Neil Blomkamp was asked about his influences, he specifically cited Starship Troopers' blend of insect aliens and political commentary. Hollywood's attempt to capitalize on the film's cult success led to a parade of direct-to-video sequels that missed everything that made the original special. Starship Troopers 2. Hero of the Federation, 2004. Abandoned satire for standard bug-hunting horror. Starship Troopers 3. Marauder, 2008. Brought back Casper Van Dien, but added bizarre religious themes. The animated Starship Troopers, Invasion, 2012, and Starship Troopers, Traitor of Mars, 2017, looked slick but lacked Verhoeven's subversive genius. A promised big-budget reboot has been stuck in development hell for years, perhaps because studios still don't know whether to play it straight or lean into the satire. The film's most enduring legacy might be its eerie political prescience. What seemed like over-the-top fascist caricature in 1997 feels uncomfortably familiar in today's media landscape. The "Would you like to know more?" propaganda segments predicted our clickbait news culture with disturbing accuracy. When viewers today watch civilians cheering as prisoners are publicly executed or soldiers high-fiving over alien corpses, the satire hits closer to home than many would care to admit. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into one of sci-fi's most misunderstood masterpieces, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos breaking down your favorite cult classics. Remember, clicking that subscribe button guarantees citizenship in our community of film fanatics. Would you like to know more?